Hello, and welcome to today's Channelcast, Maximizing Your Revenue While Minimizing Your Administration with TikkerTape, IBM Software Incentive Management. This event is brought to you by the Channel Company and TikkerTape. Joining me today is Christopher Dawson. Chris is a contributing editor with the Channel Company, and we also have Gregory Fulham. Gregory is the founder and managing director of TikkerTape. Later in the program, we're going to have a special guest joining us today, and Gregory will be very happy to introduce him as it is one of his partners. So without further ado, I would like to turn today's program over to Chris Dawson. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here, and just wanted to take a moment before we hear from TikkerTape just to sort of set the stage a bit. So let's consider this all too common scenario. You're an IBM business partner, things are going great, you're identifying prospects, you're building client relationships, and that requires an investment of time and effort and money. You find these clients and they're hungry for solutions. This, of course, being IBM, we're talking about some big solutions. We aren't talking about 50 desktops or a little cloud deployment. We're talking about potentially big iron, or we're talking about big data solutions. So you're working really hard to come up with great solutions for your clients. You've built proofs of concept. The client sees it. They've got prototypes in hand. They love it, and they're ready to go. They're ready to sign the dotted line. And then things go off the rails. The deal gets to procurement. Procurement says, great, glad you found a deal. Now go get me the lowest price. And the deal goes to the lowest bidder after all this work that you've done. And we've lost dollars, and the deal's lost. And oh no, right? So as it turns out, if you're an IBM business partner, all hope is not yet lost. It doesn't need to end there. So the good news in all of this, as many of you know, is that IBM Incentive, their incentive program, or one of their incentive programs, really favors the proactive solution provider over the deal closer. There's fulfillment bonuses and rebates that people get, and they get money if they close the deal. But the person, the provider, who really helped develop a solution, contributed to the deal and made the deal happen, there's some good ways for them to really recover, not just recover funds, but make money, even if they aren't the ones who actually closed the deal. So this is the IBM Software Value Incentive Program, or SVI. The bad news, though, unfortunately, it's not as easy as all that. It sounds great, and it is from a financial perspective, but if you want to take advantage of SVI, you've got to be fast. And by fast, you need to get this deal registered, this deal that you've put together, whether or not you close it. It needs to be registered, and it needs to be very apparent to IBM that you were the first one to be involved in building out this deal. The system itself is fairly complicated, as you can imagine, with the amount of money that's changing hands here. IBM wants to have this be really a robust system, and being robust, it ends up being very time-consuming. The documentation is extensive, it's evolving, it's changing, and there's a whole lot of chances for things to go wrong. When things go wrong, you don't get your money. So, in a nutshell, if you can actually show that you influenced an IBM deal, and not just influence, but really were the driving force behind it, you register that you were involved with the deal first, you get every last detail correct, and you meet every deadline, you're golden. Even if you don't close that deal, you can still make a pretty handy sum and certainly recoup your costs that you've invested in making this deal come together. It really, again, favors the proactive provider, the proactive value-added reseller who is going after these deals and building these great customer relationships. If you don't do those things, well, then you're back to your sad screen bean and you are stuck again. So how do you take advantage of SVI? I like to refer to this idea of DIY SVI, and lots of people are doing this. And oftentimes, because of the amount of money and the complication involved here, this falls over to the VP of sales or to someone who's in a fairly high-level position, not someone who's administrative and should rightfully be taking care of the various administrative minutiae involved in this program. It's because it's too complicated, though, and because it's too valuable, it just doesn't often get delegated. And if things go wrong, well, who gets blamed? Well, unfortunately, it's going to be that person who's been managing it. there is this idea, though, of a strategic partner, and we're going to hear from one of the very few strategic partners that exists in just a moment. A partner who can actually be an expert in SBI. This is what they do, and we're going to hear about this, and they actually have a pretty interesting way of dealing with this. Let someone else memorize that giant manual here. Focus on sales instead of all of these mountains of paperwork and the minutia. It really ends up being a strategic decision for the VAR, who can say, look, I need to hand this off to someone else. Let someone who's an expert deal with this. I'm going to focus on closing deals, or at least building those deals. And so what you have to ask yourself then is, what are these deals, or the rebates, again, if you don't close the deal, what are they worth to you? And what is this SVI? How does it really impact your bottom line? So we're going to hear a lot more details about that in just a moment. Greg, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Great, Chris. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, a lot of good information. Ladies and gentlemen, before I turn the program over to our guest from TikkerTape, Gregory Fulham, I did want to just remind you that if you do want to ask questions anytime throughout this presentation, simply type those questions into the Q&A block on the bottom left-hand side of your console and hit the submit button. We will try to take some questions at the end of the program today, and then the rest will be answered via email. So please don't hesitate at any time to type your question in. If you want a copy of today's presentation, down on the bottom there's a tab that says slides or download slides. You can simply click on that, and there's a PDF available to you as well. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to turn today's program over to Gregory Fulham with TikkerTape. Greg, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, and thanks to everybody who's joined this call. I would just say that the idea behind this and the reasoning behind the setting up of this business was that I used to work at IBM, and I used to run these programs for IBM for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And there were two things that really struck me. One was the degree of frustration that was often caused to partners by these programs, even though obviously the idea behind them is to make life as profitable and incentivize people to do the kind of activities that IBM are looking for them to do to generate business, but often that just ended up resulting in frustration. And the second thing was how much money was left on the table. It amazed me day in, day out how essentially what were very good programs were failing at the final hurdle. And so I saw there the opportunity of setting up this business, TikkerTape, which is there to facilitate and to support partners in trying to make sure they make the most out of these programs. So, as you may have gathered by my accent, TikkerTape was actually set up in the UK originally in 2006, which was when IBM launched the SVI program. We then picked up further partners across Europe, and we were fortunate enough to now set up in the US as of January, and we hired a lady called Nia Eaton, who is an expert on IBM, having worked there for a number of years as a business partner rep, and we're very pleased to have her on board. So we now manage programs for over 60 partners across the world, primarily here in the UK, but ever growing in the US and in Europe. We have, throughout our years, registered thousands of opportunities. This is where we live. This is what we do. There is no other sideline business going on here. We've also claimed millions of dollars in terms of incentives for the partners. So our experience in this area is very large, very broad, very extensive, and has been going on for a number of years. So I wanted to show on this slide in terms of what we do. The management of this program that we have is end-to-end. The objective of this is to firstly optimize your returns from the program, but it's also there to minimize the amount of work you need to do in order to utilize those programs. There are an ever-growing number of programs that IBM introduces. They look to focus on different areas, and many of those programs are now interrelated. And you need to not only understand the individual programs, but it's important to now understand the interrelationships. How does your SVI get affected by BPLM? At what point would you go for new and inactive BPLM? At which point would you use the small deal rewards programs? And following all of those things and understanding those interrelationships is what we do. So the process management goes all the way from registering those deals at the offset and putting them into the system effectively under your company name. So what we do is we set ourselves up with an ID specific to your company, which we associate through the IBM system, so we effectively look like one of your employees to IBM. We then process those, take those opportunities that you want to register, but we don't just take them and blindly put them into a system. We review them and we check them. And because we understand the IBM products and we understand the IBM processes, we also understand the kind of things that trip people up and trip up partners as they go along. So when we look at the products that the partner's trying to register, we understand that there are, within the system, over 120 different product families, and we've got to pick the right one. And we know to what level of detail we need from the partner sales guy, the level of detail we require in order to make sure we do pick the right one or the right ones on those product families. And that may sound simple, but there's lots of things that can catch people out. We've seen it with the products like Cognos TM1. Now, there is a Cognos TM1 Express version. Now, it's not actually called that, but that's how everyone recognizes it, and that's what everyone uses as the term for it. But if you pick the TM1 product family and then you end up selling the Express version, actually you lose out. Now, we're aware of that, so we make sure we also cover the BI product family into which that Express version sits. And that's just one of the myriad of examples that exists. And that's why it's key for those opportunities prior to being loaded to make sure that they're checked and understood prior to that. Because once you put it in, there's no changing it. We manage all aspects of the GPP system. We make sure that the communication between us and the salespeople that we're dealing with has a constant flow. So if we get sent a BANT form, as IBM term them, to load into the system, we communicate immediately once that's done, giving the key criteria as to what the information we were given by the sales guy and what the result of that means. So in terms of forecasting, in order to let them know what we anticipate the SVI or BPLM or VAT for government and other payments to be, and also key information around when, for example, is the earliest book date. There's a 15-day rule. You don't want to mess it up and book it on the 14th day after you register it because that's too early and IBM won't give you the payment. So we make sure that we keep the people in the loop, making sure that they understand exactly what we need as and when they need it. So in terms of also the time that you come to close a deal, you're going to need to provide potentially IBM with sales evidence of various pieces of information. Now, it's probably not the best idea to try and work out that information required on the day that you go to claim it. You need to know it beforehand so you're collecting it as you go along. That's all part of the education process that we provide through to the sales guys. And again, before we give that information to IBM, we're checking it. We understand exactly what IBM are looking for, so we can look at the stuff that you guys have and say this will work, this won't work, this would have worked if it had this information on it. And it avoids what so often happens with business partners is this toing and froing of information. What happens is the partner goes, I don't really know what they're looking for, I chuck everything at them, IBM just come back and say, no, that's not good enough, we need something else, and you end up just spending weeks at a time scraping around trying to get the information out to IBM. We try to simplify that process as much as possible by the pre-education, but also by the checking of the information once it comes through to us, and being able to articulate rapidly back to the salespeople where they're going right and where they're going wrong. In terms of that provision of expertise as and when it's needed, the thing about these programs is that there are no end of rules around them, and you may well have been sitting on an IBM presentation a month ago and have heard the new rules around BPLM. Chances are when you come to actually need to use it, you've probably forgotten it. So you then have to go back, try and find the information in Partner World, try and look for the operations guide, read through it, understand it. With us, you make us a phone call, you tell you, I've got this situation, what do I do, what's the key information you need, and we go ahead and get on with it. We also provide a status report. Anyone who's looked in GPP will see that it basically keeps an entire history of every single deal that's ever been loaded or passed to that partner, including software, hardware. What we do is we take the live information that we need at that point, and we can provide that to you guys on a weekly basis on a spreadsheet that just provides you with a snapshot of where you are. Gives you a list of the opportunities, what products we've registered them under, what levels of eligibility you're getting, and that way you have a clean and clear view of everything you've got registered for the incentive programs in your hand, up to date, once a week. The second advantage to providing that is it means that we ourselves are checking your status at least once a week. That way we make sure that things don't expire without us knowing they're going to expire, and make sure that we check the claims process as it goes through the various steps, and it makes sure that we can keep things as accurate and clean as possible. And the final thing on this slide is basically giving you snapshots of what it is that's going on within the programs at any one time. So when a new program comes in, we can give you a very clean and simple way of letting you know very quickly what is pertinent to you and your business and what's required in order to get into those programs. Recently, IBM launched a program or made some changes to a program called BPLM. We went to our partners, we explained it, it was in a couple of paragraphs, and we basically said, look, this is a no-brainer, sign up for it. Or if you want, get us to sign up for it for you. Within a week, 90% of our partners were signed up for that program. It makes it so much quicker, so much easier, whilst others who are still waiting to register to consider BPLM are now losing out on that money. This is an example just of that status report that I was referencing that you were sent once a week. It just, as I pointed out, mentioned before, it just gives you a very simple and rapid way of being able to see what your current status is. So I just have a couple of slides just to highlight the differences between doing this stuff by yourself or having someone within your team doing this stuff and using TikkerTape. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these line items. However, in order to register an opportunity with IBM and to make claims on their various incentive programs, first thing you've got to do is get yourself educated on them. And that in itself is no small task. You've then got to go in and not only get educated in terms of the programs, but you've also got to get yourself educated in terms of the systems behind those programs. You've then got to start using those systems and trying to understand your way to get through them. With us, in order to register a deal, there's just one step. There is a Word document, which IBM call a BANT form. Your guys send us that form. We're done. That's the registration process. And likewise with the claims process, again, you really have to make sure that you understand exactly what IBM are looking for, and you have to make sure that you update those systems incredibly accurately. The day you put a claim in, if it's not accurate, it's too late. For us, if you're utilizing our service, it's again one step. You send us a copy of the POE that was given for the customer. You send a copy of the quote that you gave to the customer. We take it from there, and you're done. Now, of course, IBM may come back and ask for sales evidence, but again, we will communicate that to the sales guy and explain exactly what it is IBM are looking for. And as they pass the information over to us, we'll check it and give them further guidance if required as to what we need and what information is superfluous. So what's the difference between using TikkerTape and doing this stuff yourselves? The first thing we would say is, and we can say this with some confidence because we've been doing this for 8 years and we've seen it recurringly, is we make people more money. If you register a deal second, you may as well not register it at all. If you register a deal inaccurately, you may as well not register it at all. So you get more money out of these programs because we understand these programs, and we can also ensure that the simple things that can go wrong don't go wrong. In terms of time, if in any SVI or incentive situation, there's going to be a number of people within an organization that are going to have to deal with it. There's going to be the individual sales guy. There's going to probably be some sort of administrator within the organization. There's probably going to be some sales manager involved into it as well, all of whom are going to have some kind of understanding, and all of whom are going to have to take on certain actions and tasks and find themselves basically wrapped up in trying to sort out incentive administration on behalf of IBM, when they'd be far better off going out there, selling the products that you guys are looking to sell, including your services and your solutions. This is a way of freeing up those people and keeping it as simple for them as possible. And then the final point on there is around improving confidence and morale. There is nothing more disappointing for a IBM business partner to have done all the work that's involved in terms of selling a solution or selling an IBM software, and then at the end of it to find out they're not going to get paid. And that not getting paid could well be just ticking up the wrong box on the wrong day, or putting the wrong value in the wrong line item within the system, picking the wrong product family, not having the correct name because it went through a subsidiary in Passport Advantage. All of those things can cause no end of heartache for partners, and we've seen it time and time again. And, you know, if I'm the sales guy or I'm the manager, I'm going to become very disheartened by these things very quickly if all my efforts go unrewarded. So we try and ensure by what we do that those guys get rewarded. And by being rewarded, are encouraged and incentivized to continue their good work. So you have, with TikkerTape, this unique expertise. I don't believe there is another company doing this in the US. We know that there's other companies that have looked at doing this, but they've come to realize that the level of expertise required is just not floating around for people to be able to utilize. And we have seen other companies try to do this in the UK, and they set themselves up, and they make mistakes, and they're out of the game because you cannot afford to make mistakes in this. So as I said before, around the situations where people lose money, if you start getting disheartened in that way, you start thinking of these incentive programs as not being something you can rely on. And you just sit there nervously wondering whether you will or won't get it. And it becomes what I describe here as an ad hoc bonus. We're trying to turn this into a reliable revenue stream for you. And the other thing which I'm sure even from across the Atlantic I could hear people cheering is the thought of never having to go into the IBM GPP system again. So I'm just going to give three very brief examples here of partners that we took on board and the results from which our activities have given them. So the first partner here actually won the Business Partner of the Year award recently. Now, they had been selling IBM software fairly consistently. They were selling a lot of deals on small trades, and their sales guys just weren't familiar with the systems. So they kind of left it. I mean, they just let it drop. And it was only on speaking to us and they realized how much that they could be making if they were registering things rapidly and were registering them accurately, that they started to look into that and started to engage with us. So we then managed their SVI. As you can see, we've been managing it for a number of years now. And they have consistently grown and improved their business. And obviously that money that they get, which is no insignificant sum on an annual basis, as you can see, is money that they've been able to utilize to grow their business, which has grown significantly over the last few years. This second one is an interesting one in as much as it's one of those multi-vendor organizations. The tricky thing here is you've got a situation where you've got a team of sales guys. They're never going to be an expert in all of these products. They're never going to be an expert in all of these solutions. So they focus on the ones that they think are going to be the easier to sell or the more profitable to sell. The net result for IBM was, because their deal desk struggled so much with the SVI program, they all pretty much just gave up on IBM and decided it wasn't worth trying to sell IBM. Over the course of 3 years, we increased their SVI by 5-fold, and we also got them what was in a single payment, the biggest payment that was ever made in the UK on an SVI deal. And at the end of that period, IBM Software became the product to sell within that organization because they realized that the profitability was there. And the final example I just wanted to show here was of a new partner. There are constantly acquisitions being made by IBM, and part of the process of going through those acquisitions is onboarding those partners. Now that becomes very difficult for those new partners. They've got not only to understand the way in which IBM sell and the different ways in which IBM licenses products, to then have on top of that their new relationships possibly with their distributors, and on top of that a whole bunch of incentive programs which are not easy for them to work through. To take all of that on board in one hit is a hell of an ask. And so what happens is things get dropped. And the incentive programs are often the first thing that gets dropped because although that's where the money is, it's not something you have to do. It's something you should be doing, but you don't necessarily have to do it. So people ignore it thinking, I'll get round to that later. Today I've got to engage with the licensing process. I've got to engage with my customers. I've got to engage with the distributors. I've got to engage with IBM, but I don't have to engage with the incentives. So they let them drop. And that's what happened with this partner. They basically just left it. And it was only after working with IBM and IBM saying to them, look, you really should be trying to make the most of these programs, and did an introduction to us that they started picking up on it. And I remember a call with this partner who was absolutely amazed that they were getting payments. And I mean the reason they were amazed was they weren't closing a lot of these deals themselves in terms of fulfillment, and that's why they really didn't expect anything out of these programs. And so the message in many respects to partners like that is, believe it. It happens, and we can make it happen for you. We do have a payment structure, and we've made sure that we keep this as simple as possible. There are two parts to it. One is around the general incentive programs. We charge 10% of the money that is paid by IBM on those incentive programs. On the new program called BPLM, because there's less work involved for us, but they are still strongly interrelated with the other programs, we charge 5%. Now, the truth is, as I've said, we've always increased people's revenues out of these incentive programs. And I would be delighted to have anyone challenge me and turn around and say that we cannot increase their SVI by 10%, because we've done it for everyone else. So we're more than happy and more than comfortable in taking on those challenges from partners that feel that they are optimizing, and we're happy to review with them to see if we believe that jointly is the case or not. So we have any number of partners. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we have 60 around the world. These are a few of the names which we've included here. Several of them are our new partners from the US that we've been delighted to be taking on board. Myself and Nia Eaton, who I mentioned before, who's our first US account manager, we will both be at the IBM Insight event in Vegas on the 25th to the 29th of October. So if you are there and you would like to have a chat with us, we would be very delighted to hear from you and get to spend some time talking to you face to face. And of course, you're more than welcome to contact either of us. Nia, as I mentioned, is available on the US number. Myself, I'm afraid it's a UK number, but I'm happy to give you a call back if you want to email me, or if you email Nia, of course, you'll be very responsive as well. And with that, I'd just like to introduce Brad Sheba. Brad is one of our newest clients, being from the U.S. and somebody who signed up with us recently and has been kind enough to come onto this call for us today in order to just explain his thinking behind the utilization of our services. Hi there, Brad.
Yep, thanks a lot, Greg. And I think that both Chris and Greg did a great job of sharing, some of the challenges and the reasons why, TikkerTape can be a huge value to companies like ours. But just to kind of add to that briefly, we've been a FileNet partner for so many years and came into the IBM family, through that acquisition, and since have grown our partnership with IBM into several brands. And I can say that, learning the SVI program was quite a significant learning curve for us. The IBM partnership is a huge part of our business now, and we love the partnership we have with them because IBM provides such a huge partner ecosystem with lots of great programs and really opportunities to build our business on top of their program. But it's a challenge because there are so many ways to leverage that relationship. And for a smaller company like ours, we're not a huge group. We don't have unlimited resources on the sales or even on the administration side to really keep our finger on the pulse of these programs, making sure that we're following through on our side to get the most out of that relationship that IBM offers us. And so really the partnership that we've formed with TikkerTape has been a huge help for us. We know that we can keep our sales folks focused on pleasing our customers and following up with prospects, and really through a very manageable amount of interaction with the folks at TikkerTape, we can be assured that we're doing everything right in the SVI program to make sure we can really maximize the returns on that program for us. And so really it's been a great opportunity for us, and it's certainly already paid dividends for us as we've entered into this partnership. And I can also vouch for Greg's comment that even if it was just to keep us out of GPP, this relationship would be totally worthwhile for us. So thank you to the guys at TikkerTape, and we really appreciate the partnership.
Thanks, Brad.
Well, thank you, Brad and Greg and Chris. Thank you. A lot of great information. Before we get to a couple questions that have come in, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to push out just a quick exit survey to you all. If you haven't turned off your pop-up blockers, you may want to do so. This just gives us some brief information, brief feedback on what you thought about today's presentation. So again, if you get that survey, if you could please just simply answer the questions and hit the submit answer button at the bottom. Again, all that is just great feedback for the folks at TikkerTape and myself. So without further ado, Greg, I'm just going to ask you a couple quick questions, if you wouldn't mind, just for some clarification here. One question that came in, it says, what if I already have an administrator registering these deals for me? What would the benefit be of engaging your services versus using their person?
Yes, and this is something we hear very often. This person's been doing this here at our organization, and she or he seems fairly comfortable and familiar with it, and, why would we pay someone else now to do that role? I mean, obviously, the simple answer is that we may end up being cheaper, but I would think the best answer would be because we will make you more money than you're likely to be utilizing with an administrator. And the reason for that is no matter how good the administrator is, they're not going to have that level of experience and interaction with these programs. I mean, this is all we do. This is our day in, our day out. And so we have developed a long-term expertise and relationship with IBM in order to make the most of these programs for our partners.
Great. Greg, this is kind of a follow-up to that question. It says, if I'm giving up 10% of my rebates, how do I justify that to my management?
Yeah, this usually comes from the finance department. The simple answer, again, is essentially that, if we can't make you that more than 10% than you were making previously, then you're absolutely right. What would be the point of doing it? I mean, I would be totally on any partner's side that said that. Again, we are very confident that we can do that. In the UK, in every case where there's been a partner previously doing SVI, in all but one, we actually doubled the SVI that they got within the first 12 months of taking us on board. So we think that we can pay our way fairly comfortably.
Yeah, I think that's the key factor there, Greg. You just mentioned doubling and making sure that the payments are actually made and everything happens, because sometimes things don't happen unless somebody's on top of it for you. So I think that's your value, again, right there. Another question that came in, it says, are there any programs that you guys don't cover at TikkerTape?
There are probably two programs that are generally used that we don't cover. One of them is RVI, which is the Renewal Value Incentive, and the other one is a program called VAP. Now, there's not to be confused with VAP for government that we do cover. But in both the case of RVI and VAP, there is no real value add that we can give on those programs. We understand them. We're more than happy to give advice on them. But in terms of the back-end administration, there isn't much that we could be adding value to. And as such, we decided that we wouldn't look to seek, to make an offering in that area.
Okay. Greg, here's another one. It says, can you give me a broader understanding of all of the incentive programs? I'm sure there's a lot of them, and I'm sure it's confusing for folks.
Yeah, I think, from my times working at IBM, one of the things I think IBM can be a bit weak at times is giving summaries that are easily comprehensible. They tend to be either too broad brush, in which case, some of the detail that you really do need to know is missing, or tends to be 100 pages worth of operations guide, which, most people are never going to get through. So what we do provide is summary material, and there is a PDF within the TikkerTape.com website, which does give a very up-to-date summary of the various programs that exist, and I think gives people enough information to at least get a grip of the general direction in which those programs work and what they can expect to see from those programs.
Great. Greg, I'm going to ask Chris just for a final thought here. Chris has heard you talk for a while. He's heard Brad talk for a while. Chris, can you just give us the quick, what you think the takeaway is for the audience?
Absolutely. I think that this is a program that is deep, it's complex, and it's really, really valuable. I mean, SVI can generate a lot of money for business partners that, as we heard from Gregory, have even thought about turning away from selling IBM just because of this very issue of being able to recoup their costs and proactively develop solutions. So if you want to be one of those providers, one of those resellers, you need to have SVI in your back pocket, and to deal with the intricacies of it, it's kind of hard to argue with the value prop coming out of TikkerTape.
Great. Chris, thank you very much. Brad, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to give us a quick final closing thought before I turn the program over to Gregory?
No, not at all. It's I can vouch for what the claims that Gregory has made. I mean, when you look at the standard margins that we as a partner have an opportunity to make with IBM through our software resale, sometimes that can be a little discouraging, but I can guarantee you that the help that the guys at TikkerTape will bring to the table will absolutely justify the fees, and the model they have is extremely easy for us to work with, and it's been a great investment. So I would definitely vouch for their point of view on that.
Great, Brad. Thank you very much. And Gregory, I'm going to ask you for a quick final closing thought before I close up today's program.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think my closing thought would be that I would just like to thank the partners that have worked with us so far, and also to acknowledge that this is not me trying to say that the IBM programs are not as they should be. I used to work in the design of these programs, and I think that what IBM do in the introduction of these programs is fantastic, and what they're trying to achieve is highly commendable, because they are trying to make sure that partners that put the effort in, that do all that good work, are the ones that get the value from them. But where it becomes a tragedy is if partners trip up. So anything we can do to work with those partners to stop that from happening to them, I'd recommend they get in touch with us.
Great. Gregory, thank you very, very much. Christopher, thank you much. And Brad, thank you very, very much. A lot of great information. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for more information on other channel casts or just information from crn.com, you can go to our facebook.com/channelcast page, or you can go to crn.com/channelcast, and there's a lot more information. Before we close today's program, I do want to push a site out to you, which is www.TikkerTape.com. And again, if you have your pop-up blockers on, it may not open for you, but I'd like to take you there anyways. Again, there's a lot of information, as Gregory has talked about, on their programs and their services, and we'd love you to check it out. So on behalf of our guests today, Christopher Dawson, Gregory Fulham, and again, Brad, we would like to thank you for joining us today. And please make sure if you haven't submitted a question, you do so within the console. And I wanted to wish you all a good day. And again, thank you on behalf of the channel company and TikkerTape for participating in today's program. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Have a good day.